$1 million. That's what's sitting on the table right now, waiting, unclaimed. All someone has to do is make one phone call, pick up the phone, dial the FBI tip line, and tell them what they know about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Nancy is 84 years old. She lived in the same house in Tucson, Arizona for 4 decades. She raised her family there. She watched her granddaughter become one of the most recognized journalists in America. On the night of January 31st, 2026, someone took her from that home. That was over a month ago. Over 400 investigators have worked this case. The FBI has received more than 55,000 tips. They have collected thousands of hours of video footage from the neighborhood. And the FBI believes there's an accomplice, someone who helped, someone who knows exactly what happened that night. $1 million is waiting for that person. So why hasn't anyone claimed it? Think about that for a moment. $1 million, potentially anonymous, potentially tax-free, cash at a post office box. And all you have to do is tell them what you know. No one's talking. The silence tells us something. It tells us everything, actually. Because the reason no one is claiming that money reveals exactly what happened to Nancy Guthrie. But before we can understand why no one is coming forward, we need to understand who Nancy Guthrie was. Not the victim, not the case. The woman. This is Gravel Ghost Basement, and this is the story of Nancy Guthrie. The Catalina Foothills. It's one of those neighborhoods where the houses sit back from the road, where saguaro cacti stand like sentinels in front yards, where people come to retire and live out their days watching the desert sky change colors at sunset. Nancy Guthrie moved here over 40 years ago. She wasn't retiring then. She was building a life, raising a family, putting down roots that would stretch across decades. This house, this specific house on this specific street. Nancy watched her daughter Annie grow up here. She watched the neighborhood change around her. She watched presidents come and go, watched technology transform the world, watched her quiet corner of Arizona stay mostly the same. 40 years in one home. Think about that. The memories embedded in those walls, the Christmas mornings, the ordinary Tuesday evenings, the thousands of sunrises she watched from her kitchen window, looking out at the Catalina Mountains. Nancy's granddaughter is Savannah Guthrie. If you've watched morning television in America in the last decade, you know her face. She's the co-anchor of the Today Show, one of the most watched programs in the country. But before Savannah was interviewing presidents and breaking news to millions of viewers, she was a young reporter at KVOA in Tucson. It was her second local TV job. She was just starting out, learning her craft and building a career that would eventually take her to the biggest stage in broadcast journalism. Nancy was there for all of it, watching her granddaughter's career unfold, proud of what Savannah was becoming. Outside KVOA today, there's a banner. It says, "Bring her home." It's covered in signatures and messages from the community, hundreds of them, holding you in our hearts. We all have had a mother. Bring closure to this family. Minnesota is praying for you. Someone from Minnesota traveled to Tucson to sign that banner, to add their name to the voices calling for Nancy to come home. At 84, Nancy was living alone. But she wasn't isolated. She had dinner with her daughter Annie regularly. She had a routine. She had a life that, by all accounts, was quiet and comfortable, and exactly what she wanted. On January 31st, Tommaso Cioni dropped Nancy off at home after dinner. It was about 9:47 p.m. They said goodnight. Nancy walked inside. That was the last time Nancy Guthrie was seen. All for 40 years, Nancy Guthrie watched the sun rise over the Catalina Mountains from her kitchen window. On February 1st, 2026, someone made sure she would never see it again. Before we talk about what happened that night, I need to take you back 3 weeks. January 11th, 2026. 20 days before Nancy disappeared. A figure appeared on doorbell camera footage near Nancy's home, walking backward, face obscured, moving in a way that suggested someone who didn't want to be identified. The backward walker. At the time, no one thought anything of it. Why would they? Strange people walk through neighborhoods all the time. You don't assume someone is casing your street for a future crime. But after Nancy vanished, the FBI went back through every piece of footage they could find, and they found that image. January 11th, the backward walker. The neighbors are creeped out by this, and they should be. Because it means that whoever took Nancy didn't act on impulse. They planned, they watched, they waited. For at least 3 weeks, someone was stalking this neighborhood. Now let's go to January 31st, 9:47 p.m. Tommaso drops Nancy off at her home after dinner. They say goodnight. Nancy walks inside. Tommaso drives away. This is the last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie by someone related to her. What happens next is a gap. 4 hours where we don't know exactly what Nancy was doing. Maybe she was reading, maybe watching television, maybe getting ready for bed. The ordinary things you do in your own home at night when you have no reason to think anything is wrong. February 1st. Approximately 1:30 a.m. Doorbell camera footage captures a figure approaching Nancy's front door, dressed in dark clothing, face covered by a mask, moving with purpose. This is the image that changed everything. A figure at Nancy's door in the middle of the night. Someone who shouldn't be there. Someone who came prepared not to be identified. The figure enters the home. For the next 41 minutes, someone was inside Nancy Guthrie's house. 41 minutes. What happened during those 41 minutes? We don't know exactly. The FBI hasn't released those details, but we know 2 things. First, there was blood. When investigators processed the scene, and they found blood on the front steps. Evidence of violence. Second, Nancy was gone. When Annie came to check on her mother the next morning, the house was empty. Here's something that makes this even more disturbing. The FBI found 2 DNA profiles at the scene, 2 distinct genetic signatures that don't match Nancy. 2 profiles could mean 2 perpetrators, or it could mean 1 perpetrator and a degraded or mixed sample. We don't know yet, but what we do know is that those DNA profiles haven't been matched to anyone. They're not in the system. Whoever they belong to hasn't been caught yet. So let's put this together. 20 days of watching. 41 minutes inside. 2 DNA profiles. Blood on the steps. And Nancy Guthrie vanished into the Arizona night. When the sun rose over the Catalina Mountains on February 1st, Nancy wasn't there to see it. The response to Nancy's disappearance was immediate and massive. Initially, this was a local case. The Pima County Sheriff's Office responded, but by day 3 or 4, the FBI was involved. And once the FBI entered the picture, everything changed. At the peak, over 400 investigators were working this case. 400 people dedicated to finding one 84-year-old woman. The FBI tip line received more than 55,000 calls. I know 55,000 people who thought they might know something and have seen something or have information that could help. Investigators collected thousands of hours of video footage from the neighborhood. Traffic cameras, doorbell cameras, security systems. Anything that might have captured a vehicle, a figure, a clue. A retired FBI special agent who explained what happens with all that footage. It's not just watching videos, it's enhancement, slowing things down. Trying to identify vehicle types and trying to see details that the human eye misses at normal speed. But here's something interesting the FBI looks for. Absence of normalcy. Who drives around a neighborhood at 1:30 a.m. without their phone on? Who has a car that doesn't connect to cell towers or GPS systems? The people who show up as blanks, no phone signal, no car connectivity, those people go to the top of the list. It's the same principle that helped identify Brian Kohberger in the Idaho murders. He turned his phone off. That absence of data was itself a piece of evidence. Early in the investigation, there were ransom notes, demands for money in exchange for Nancy's safe return. The FBI investigated these notes. They took them seriously, and then they debunked them. The ransom notes were fake. Opportunists trying to cash in on a family's tragedy. People who had no connection to Nancy's disappearance, just trying to steal money from people in pain. When the ransom notes were debunked, it cleared a path. It eliminated one theory. Well, but it also raised a darker possibility. Because if this wasn't a kidnapping for ransom, what was it? Recently, FBI agents returned to their office in Phoenix, about 2 hours from Tucson. Some people wondered if this was a bad sign, if the case was going cold. According to retired FBI sources, it's actually the opposite. Working from a major office gives investigators access to closed FBI systems, evidence rooms, specialized technical teams. It's not a retreat, it's a consolidation. Kerr, the deputy who had been guarding Nancy's house around the clock, finally left and Scene was released back to the family. But that doesn't mean the investigation is over. It means the active collection phase has shifted to analysis and follow-up. A retired FBI special agent said something electrifying. Every single solitary cop on that sheriff's department, every FBI agent who touched this case, they want this perpetrator brought to justice. And they'll never forget. Look at Whitey Bulger. He was on the run for 16 years. We never stopped looking. We finally got him. This case isn't cold. It's simmering. And all that pressure brings us back to the million-dollar question. Let's talk about that $1 million again. The FBI believes there was more than one person involved in Nancy's disappearance. An architect, the person who planned it, and possibly an accomplice, someone who helped execute it. A getaway driver, a lookout, someone who knew what was going to happen and participated. If that's true, there's someone out there right now who knows exactly what happened to Nancy Guthrie, and there's $1 million waiting for them if they come forward. Think about that. If you're one of 2 people involved in a crime and there's $1 million reward, you're living in constant fear. Not just fear of getting caught, fear that the other person will turn on you. Every day that passes, you're wondering, are they going to call the FBI? Are they going to take the money and give me up? And here's the economics of it. Accomplices in crimes like this typically get paid very little, $2,500, maybe less. You're risking years in prison for what amounts to a few months' rent. Now suddenly, there's $1 million on the table. The person who orchestrated this wasn't going to pay you $1 million. But the FBI will. The math is simple. Come forward. Give up the architect. Get $1 million. Potentially avoid prison time through a deal with prosecutors. So why isn't anyone coming forward? This is the question that keeps investigators up at night, and there are only a few possible answers. Possibility 1. There is no accomplice. The perpetrator acted alone. One person planned this, executed it, and disappeared with Nancy without any help. If that's the case, there's no one to come forward. The only person with information is the person who did it. This would suggest a highly sophisticated individual. Someone who spent weeks planning, who was careful enough to leave minimal evidence, who was physically capable of carrying out the crime alone. Possibility 2. The accomplice is too deeply implicated. Maybe there is an accomplice, but they can't come forward without confessing to something serious. Maybe they didn't just drive the getaway car. Maybe they were in the house. Maybe they participated in violence against Nancy. If that's the case, the $1 million isn't enough. Because coming forward means confessing to a crime that could put them away for life. The deal they'd need isn't just money, it's immunity. And that might not be on the table. Possibility 3. Fear. The accomplice is more afraid of the perpetrator than motivated by the money. This could suggest organized crime, or simply that the perpetrator has significant power over the accomplice. Family members, loved ones, something that makes $1 million feel like a small price compared to the consequences of talking. Possibility 4. Nancy is still alive. This is the most hopeful scenario, but also the most complicated. If Nancy is being held somewhere and the perpetrators still believe they can extract money for her return, coming forward destroys that plan. But this theory has a major problem. The ransom notes were debunked. If this was a kidnapping for ransom, where are the real demands? Where is the proof of life? A retired FBI agent said bluntly, "That tells me it wasn't a kidnapping, and it was a murder. Because if it was a kidnapping, they would have proof of life. They would be trying to get something. It's like opening a restaurant and never serving food. No one's going to do that." The silence from the accomplice, if there is one, points toward something darker than kidnapping. It points toward a crime that can't be walked back. A crime where coming forward means admitting to something far worse than just driving a car. Based on everything we know, there are 3 main theories about what happened to Nancy Guthrie. I'm not going to tell you what I think happened. That's not my place, and I don't have access to what investigators know, but I can lay out the frameworks that people are using to understand this case. Theory 1. Burglary gone wrong. The Catalina foothills is a wealthy neighborhood. It's the kind of area that attracts burglars looking for easy targets. Elderly people living alone. Houses with valuables inside. Streets quiet enough that you might not be noticed. A burglary detective with years of experience said he believes this could have been a burglary that went catastrophically wrong. The burglars he investigated had criminal histories, and they would do anything not to get caught. He described them running barefoot through cactus to escape, because they knew if they were caught again, they were going away for a long time. Under this theory, someone broke in expecting an empty house. Nancy was supposed to be asleep or not there. When she confronted the intruder, things escalated. Something happened that couldn't be undone, and now the perpetrator is trapped. They can't come forward because they'd be confessing to something far worse than burglary. The problem with this theory, the level of planning. 20 days of casing the neighborhood. That's unusual for a simple burglary. Burglars tend to be opportunistic. This suggests premeditation. Theory 2. Targeted crime. Nancy Guthrie's granddaughter is one of the most famous journalists in America. That visibility brings risks that most families never have to think about. Under this theory, someone targeted Nancy specifically because of who she was related to. The weeks of surveillance make more sense under this framework. The perpetrator was planning something specific, not just looking for any house to rob. The ransom notes, even though they were debunked as fake, show that people immediately thought of kidnapping for ransom. It's a logical assumption given the family's profile. The problem with this theory, no credible ransom demands followed through. If someone took Nancy to leverage her famous granddaughter, where's the follow-through? Why hasn't there been contact that the FBI considers legitimate? Theory 3. Inside knowledge. The perpetrator knew things. They knew Nancy's patterns. They knew the house layout. They knew when she would be home and when she would be vulnerable. Under this theory, someone with access to information about Nancy, a service worker, a former employee, someone who had been in the house, used that knowledge to plan the crime. This would explain the precision, the timing, the fact that the perpetrator seemed to know what they were walking into. The problem with this theory, no known conflicts or disputes have been reported. There's no obvious person in Nancy's life who would have motive. But absence of known motive doesn't mean absence of motive. And then there's the DNA question. 2 DNA profiles, neither matched to anyone in the system. This could mean 2 perpetrators worked together, or it could mean 1 perpetrator and a degraded or contaminated sample. We don't know. What we do know is that the DNA will eventually tell a story. When, not if, investigators identify who those profiles belong to, we'll have a much clearer picture of what happened. I'm not going to tell you what I think happened. That's not my place. But I can tell you this. Whoever took Nancy Guthrie planned it. They watched her. They waited. And they believed they could get away with it. They were wrong. I want to go back to that banner outside KVOA. Every message on it represents someone who cares. Someone who looked at what happened to Nancy Guthrie and felt something. Someone who wanted to be counted among the voices calling for her to come home. God is with you wherever you are. Tucson Appliance is here for you guys. Nancy, the Lord will bring you home to your family, no matter what. Annie, Cameron, Savannah, Tucson is with you. Hundreds of messages, from locals and from people across the country. Minnesota, California, New York. People who have no connection to Tucson except that they heard about an 84-year-old grandmother who vanished and they couldn't look away. That's the thing about cases like this. They ripple outward. Nancy Guthrie lived a quiet life in a quiet neighborhood, and now her name is known across America. Savannah Guthrie has been largely silent publicly. She hasn't done interviews about her grandmother's disappearance. She hasn't used her platform to make appeals. I respect that. This is her family, her grandmother. She gets to decide how much of her grief to share with the world. But the community is speaking for her. Every signature on that banner, every tip to the FBI hotline, every person who shares this story, they're adding their voice to the call. Bring Nancy home. Before we continue, I want to say something to everyone watching. Nancy Guthrie's story has reached people from Minnesota to Arizona. Messages on that banner came from across the country. If her story matters to you, if you believe victims deserve to be remembered as people, not just cases, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button. We tell stories like this one at Gravel Ghost Basement, victim-centered, documentary style. The truth as best we can find it. And I have a favor to ask. Drop a comment with your city and what time you're watching this. Are you watching at midnight in London? 6 a.m. in Sydney? Lunch break in Chicago? This helps me understand when to publish these videos so they reach the most people. You're not just a viewer. You're part of how these stories get told. We're a community here, and communities remember. Now, let me tell you what happens next for Nancy. $1 million sits unclaimed. 2 DNA profiles remain unmatched. And Nancy Guthrie has been missing for over a month. The FBI continues to work the case. Over 400 investigators touched it at the peak. They've received 55,000 tips. They've processed thousands of hours of video. They're analyzing phone data, car data, DNA data. They're waiting for someone to crack, waiting for the air fryer to get too hot, waiting for someone to decide that $1 million is worth more than their silence. And while they wait, the days keep passing. Day 29, day 30, day 31. Each sunrise that Nancy doesn't see. I started this video by asking why no one has claimed the $1 million reward. The answer, whatever it turns out to be, will tell us what happened to Nancy. If there's no accomplice, we're looking for a sophisticated lone actor who planned for weeks and executed alone. If the accomplice is too implicated, something terrible happened in that house, something that can't be bargained away with immunity deals. If fear is keeping them silent, then we're dealing with something bigger than one crime against one woman. And if Nancy is somehow still alive, every day that passes without proof of life makes that hope harder to hold on to. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please call the FBI tip line, 1-800-22-553-24. $1 million is waiting, but more importantly, a family is waiting. Annie, Savannah, everyone who loved Nancy and wants her to come home. Someone knows something. The story belongs to the people who can't tell it themselves. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She lived in the same house for 4 decades. She raised her family there. She watched the desert sunrise from her kitchen window. She was proud of her granddaughter, proud of what Savannah had built. She deserves to come home. This has been Gravel Ghost Basement. Honor victims, expose evil. Until next time.